I'm not putting any pressure on either you or me, but this is the first thing I've done in my entire career that I know my family is engaging with.
Are they?
Yeah.
Well, your dad
My dad is here. My
Right.
father is... This may well be a turning point in my relationship with my whole family,
Do you
because
think?
my dad might actually start telling our relatives in India what I do for a living instead of saying that I've been on a decade-long gap year. At which point, there's got to be a few of them that are thinking jail.
They probably are. Or North Sea oil rig.
North Sea oil rig, yeah.
So you're suggesting that they haven't necessarily bought into your stand-up comedy?
No, it took them a while to buy into it. They they rented it for a couple of years,
right.
Then rescinded that, and now they finally bought. I think TMS is the last veneer of credibility that I needed.
So you love your cricket anyway, obviously.
Absolutely,
clearly.
yeah. I mean, I think it's absolutely unavoidable. If you're born in this country with Indian parentage, you can't really escape cricket. And it's one of the most interesting things is spending a lot of time in India as I do, is seeing the relationship India has with cricket, because it's absolute fanaticism.
It is.
You know, I've seen pictures.
It wasn't always like that, though, I don't think.
No, I don't think it was.
No.
But it's now tipped over into a kind of... I mean, I've genuinely been to Hindu temples where outside they have pictures of gods and a picture of Tendulkar.
Yeah. It is a sort of fanaticism, though, isn't it? Whether it's telly that's done it and the IPL. But I mean, I toured there, first of all, in the mid-'80s, and there were huge crowds.
Yeah.
Calcutta, I remember, 85, 90,000 there at Eden Gardens. But it wasn't quite the same sort of madness.
Yeah, that's right.
Fanaticism and fireworks and all that sort of stuff. It was just people who loved cricket.
Of course.
But slightly in a calmer atmosphere than there is these days.
Now it's really intense, and also cricketers are kind of rock stars in India. It's really hard to explain to people, especially people in England who don't necessarily like cricket, to explain that in India Virat Kohli is basically Mick Jagger.
Would it work here, do you think? Can you imagine? And we've got this new tournament that's going to get new people.
Yeah, sure.
Southern Asian people. They hope to come, which suggests therefore they might try and tap into that sort of thing. Do you think it'll work here?
I mean, I hope that it brings people to the game. I'm slightly cynical about the idea of just shortening it until eventually we end up with 1-over cricket or whatever it is. I'm always slightly wary about that. But then I was quite suspicious of 2020, and I think what I'm basically discovering is that when it comes to cricket, my peak enjoyment of cricket would have been about 1973 had I been alive at the time.
It wasn't quite. It was quite dull then. I think you got Jeff Boycott blocking it. I think it's got a bit more entertaining these days, even Test cricket. What do you remember then? So here you are, your first generation, and your dad's here. Obviously, loves his cricket. So we're talking about Kerala with him, which is lovely. With cricket in your household then, as a kid, what was it? Was it English cricket? Was your dad talking about Indian cricket? Was it? How did it all work?
Well, I've grown up with the spectre of the legend of Sonny Gavaskar.
Have you?
As a kind of hanging over.
Because that'd be your dad's
favourite
generation.
Yeah, my dad's hero.
Well, you might meet him in a minute. He's working with us today.
But I started watching cricket really in the kind of early mid-90s when the Indian team was sort of Tendulkar plus 10 others.
Yes.
But I will always have a huge amount of affection for that era, and particularly that England team as well. The kind of England team of Alex Stewart, Graham Thorpe and Darren Gough.
Had a lot of down points as well, the England team at that stage, let's be honest. Cool, did they ever, didn't they?
But I will always have a special place in my heart for that era of English cricket. Especially Darren Gough was one of my heroes.
Oh, was he?
When I was a young man. Yeah, it was that particular period of English cricket.
Yeah.
Was when.
What did Goughy do for you then?
I think he had. I liked the sort of slingy action. He was an English bowler that could sort of muck in with the kind of Pakistanis with the reverse swing. He had that sort of slingy thing, and he also stood up to the Australians, and he was really one of the sort of England cricketers who really wasn't overawed by that Australian team, which was at the time just absolutely steamrollering everyone.
Very committed Goughy, wasn't it? I mean, you always knew you were getting 100% out of Darren Gough, tearing in. Yeah. Did you ever meet Tendulkar? Have you ever? I mean, have you ever?
I once touched the hem of his garment.
You touched the hem of his garment? hope appropriately.
We went to see India play Sri Lanka at the Oval. I think it would have been in 2002.
Yes.
And just as he was coming up, we were sat in the stand just underneath where the dressing rooms are. And just as he was coming past, everyone was sort of patting the players on the back. And I just remember just slowly, it was like an out-of-body experience, just slowly reaching out and just stroking Tendulkar's back.
Oh, he's back.
It was not my finest moment in retrospect, but I think I was so I queued for 3 hours in probably the late 90s to meet Brian Lara. So it was like, there are certain kind of totemic cricketers in my mind.
Well, they're certainly two of that generation, aren't they?
But seeing Tendulkar in person was a pretty overwhelming experience.
How did he feel?
He felt classy.
Did he?
He felt classy.
So disappointing
and
he
he
didn't.
smelt superb.
Did he? Again, disappointing if he hadn't. So it was a positive experience.
It was a completely positive experience for me. For him, I imagine it was quite disconcerting.
It might have been. But yeah, he's kind of used to it. And you mentioned Sonny. I mean, we work with Sonny in India as well.
Yeah.
And the adulation for these people.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It is extraordinary. I mean, do you think it's healthy? Do you think it's good?
I'm not sure how healthy it is for the people involved. I'm not sure, because I imagine Tendulkar's had quite a tricky life, and you read things about him that he has to he can really only go places at midnight because otherwise he'll be mobbed, and I imagine that's quite tricky. I mean, for the country, every nation needs its heroes, and I mean, in this country, our footballers tend to be the kind of national icons, and in India, the cricketers just fill that role, but it's just so much more intense because it's a nation of 1 billion people.
Yes.
There's Virat Kohli's shoulders are currently carrying the hopes of a sixth of the world's population or whatever it is. So I mean, the pressure must be incredibly intense.
It must be. And I don't understand how they cope with that quite. I mean, I've sat at cricket grounds in India when Tendulkar, the openers had gone out, as it were, and there's a very small crowd.
Yeah.
I remember this, particularly when we were in Nagpur, I think, or something like that. And then the word gets out, Tendulkar's about to come in, the wicket falls, and you could just see a sort of cloud of dust coming towards the cricket ground. It'd be like the road runner, but it would be about 2,000 motorbikes, all kicking up this dust and parking at the ground. And suddenly the ground's full.
It's extraordinary.
Incredible how he played his cricket so brilliantly, but with that pressure.
Yeah, it is. I almost can't relate to what that must be like to have that weighing on you the entire time, and especially for periods where he was carrying the team, kind of in the kind of late 90s, but really before the kind of emergence of the Ganguly era.
Yes,
he was carrying the team for a long time, and then that kind of early 2000s period when India came through with Dravid, and there was a bit more, and Sehwag, there was a bit, it was a bit, I think, easier for him.
I loved Sehwag.
Oh, Sehwag he was box office. He was absolute it was a 0 or 100, very little in between.
Yes.
He was pure box office. I've never seen someone. It was funny, but that he was in the team at the same time as Rahul Dravid, because you couldn't have had two more opposite players.
No.
Dravid is the absolute textbook technical batsman. You could teach kids how to play cricket just by showing them video of Rahul Dravid, and then it must have been so frustrating for him to look down the other end and see Sehwag I don't think he moved his feet once in 10 years.
Carving the ball here all over the place,
swinging wildly, but like also just pure hand-eye coordination as well. Like it's the most extraordinary ability to just plant his feet like a baseball player and just absolutely smash the ball to all parts of the ground. It must have been. It was. I mean, that's the joy of cricket, isn't it? That you
total contrasts,
complete contrast, and you can have. There's so much technique and so much stuff that you can learn, but there is also the space for genius and unteachable genius.
Tell me about queuing up for Brian Lara then. Where was that?
He's in Debenhams on Oxford Street.
What?
Brian Lara.
What's he doing in there?
It's a different era of cricket.
Right.
Brian Lara did a signing when he came out with this kind of range of, I think maybe it was clothing. It was certainly like a Brian Lara signature range.
Right.
And we went to...
shirts or
honestly,
underwear or something? Or?
I think it might be a combination of the two.
Right.
But I honestly, if my cousins hadn't been with me, I would have thought that I made this up, because we went to Oxford Street to the Debenhams, and there was a queue of thousands of people,
right?
And everyone was waiting, and it was just a full queue of West Indians and Indians who were queuing to meet Brian Lara, and it was so intense that we ended up waiting, I think, for sort of 2.5 hours in the queue to try and get to him. And when we did meet him, and I've got Brian Lara's autograph.
Signed on what?
I had an old autograph book that I also have Brian Lara's autograph, and I also have the autograph of Phil Tufnell. I've got Tuffer's autograph. Yeah, I met him.
When did you get that?
I met him at when he retired at Bronsbury Cricket Ground. He had this kind of event for the end of his career. I would dare say Tuffers wouldn't remember it, because even though I was quite young at the time, I was certainly old enough to know he was somewhat refreshed.
I think you got the wrong man. I think you've got a forged Phil Tufnell autograph, because I can't believe Philip will have been like that.
He was somewhat refreshed in the mid-afternoon.
Oh, no, definitely not Tuffers. How dare you? How dare you possibly mention that? Here we go. Lara was at Debenhams. Oh, it was a jeans company, you see.
Right.
Thank you indeed, Henry, for that. Yeah, there you go. In August '95, so a long time ago.
Wow, that is a long time ago.
Yeah, well, at least you got his signature. I got his signature once when he got his 375 at Antigua. I had an Antiguan T-shirt.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I thought I've got to get it. And it was for my soon-to-be wife, a charity event. What could be better to auction Brian Lara on an Antigua shirt on the day he scored 375? And I went up and got to interview him.
Yeah.
Got the felt pen. Best wishes, Brian Lara, all over the front of that T-shirt. Thought, fantastic. I'm in here. I had a last bit of persuasion for Emma, really. This was going to clinch it. This was the deal clincher.
Deal clincher.
Got home. I was in a bachelor flat. Opened the suitcase, washing machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Out it came. Can I tell you, Purcell does wash whiter. Ruined. Beautiful T-shirt. Beautiful T-shirt. But anyway, it was...
Beautiful T-shirt, absolutely spotless.
Yeah. So that was disappointing. Did you play?
You're very, very badly. I played probably from the age of probably from 8 or 9 until I was about 14 or 15 years old. And I started out as an opening bowler, and then I just started out as right arm fast. Yes. And then fast medium. It's quite there's elements of Lasith Malinga about my hair.
There is. There's a good start.
It was, but then what happened was that the other kids all grew, and I did not. So I slowly went from fast medium to medium fast to medium, and when I ended my glorious cricketing career, I was an off-spin bowler. Right. Just by I didn't really turn the ball. I just was bowling quite slowly. Right. I think, and what I was hoping for was a sort of gust of wind would drag it back into the batsman. Yeah. But I won. I mean, this is something I've talked about on stage a few times. I played for Addiscombe Cricket Club in Croydon. And I won, when I was 11 years old, I won an award for cricket. And whenever you say that to people go, oh, you must have been quite a good player. But I always say...
Man of the match or something?
Yeah, wait until you hear the award, because it was better. The awards were best batsman, best bowler, and best all-round player. I didn't win any of those. I won an award called Clubman of the Year.
Oh, that's always rather nice.
Which I subsequently found out was presented on the criteria of the boy who'd shown the most enthusiasm in the face of an overwhelming lack of ability.
That's what it usually is. Yes, in fact, as a little tip, if you see yourself being nominated as Clubman of the Year, I think you just erase your name. It's a very nice award to have.
It's a lovely award to have.
It is a reflection of your ability, though, I'm afraid.
It is a reflection. It's, to date, the only piece of any success I've enjoyed in sport is 1997 or maybe 1996 Addiscombe Colts Cricket Club Clubman of the Year. Yeah.
Do you still keep the trophy? Is it still?
I've still got the trophy. I've still got the trophy at home. It was, I think, because my dad is actually he's quite a good sportsman, and in fact quite a lot of my family are quite very sort of naturally talented. One of my cousins certainly played for England up to the under-19s, I think. Right. And his brother was also really, really talented cricketer. Across my entire family, there's just, people who are just, if not outstanding, at least have a kind of natural faculty for ball games. Whereas I'm some sort of outlier. Malcolm Gladwell could write a whole book about me. I'm some kind of weird rogue element that I have absolutely no hand-eye coordination whatsoever, and have the sort of natural body shape of a 50-year-old accountant. So it's like the combination. I don't really know where it went wrong for me.
But you see, where I would have had you, if you were in my team, because you, I think, would be perfect at this. I would have you close enough to the bats, and I think I'd probably have you fielding in the gully. Yeah. because I reckon you would be a magnificent sledger. Because sledging for me is not being rude and horrid and nasty.
No.
It's the acerbic one-liner that's just digs away at the batsman. And I think a cricketing comedian would be a fantastic sledger, in the proper sense of sledging, just interrupting a batsman's train of thought, getting into his head, being a little bit rude.
I think that probably would be my best position.
I think you would.
I think if you've got a really strong team...
the team sledger.
Yeah, the team sledger. Just have me out there, in the batsman's ear. I mean, we're comedians, so we're used to being heckled. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure I could turn around some of the stuff that I've heard on stage.
Yes.
And... get into people's heads.
Yeah, because that's what that's all about. Tell me about your comedy, come on, because you said about your dad not really buying into. I don't necessarily believe that, but was it difficult for young first generation Indian to go on stage, a stand-up comedy? We're breaking new ground.
It's an oddly tricky thing for anybody to start a career in, because the problem is you embark on an unpaid apprenticeship for what is essentially an undetermined amount of time. So there are some people who, because you do these gigs for no money for years,
right? And
some people that sort of takes 1 or 2 years, and for some of us it's a half-decade slog. So with that sort of thing, you do have to. There is an amount of necessary delusion to get you through the first couple of years of being a stand-up comedian.
Yeah. What made you want to do it? I mean, it seems a pretty brutal business to me.
I mean, I think the thing is, I always absolutely adored comedy, and I think there's a generation of British Asian comics coming through now that were pretty directly inspired by Goodness Gracious Me. Like, if you look at the sort of timeline of it, I think we were all comedy fans, but there's something about seeing that show go on television, a British Asian sketch show where the humour is kind of derived from the conversations around race, but very much sort of punching out as Asians rather than having the joke be on us. And I think that there was something about that. I went to see them live at the Hackney Empire in probably, I think, 1999, and I think that certainly planted the seed in my mind. And I think you're seeing now with people like Ramesh Ranganathan, I think that you're seeing a lot of us come through now who were sort of facilitated by that. Just because when you see a bunch of Asians doing it, you go, oh, well, that's an option that's open to me. Because I was a comedy fan, but I think just without that simple visual, it might not have occurred to me that it was something that I could do.
See, that's interesting, because that takes us back to cricket again, and the initiatives that are going on at the moment. The ECB is doing to try and attract, particularly South Asians actually, into cricket. Needing role models, where are the Asian cricketers playing for England now? And do you think that they do need an obvious role model out there to be attracted to this, like you were with your comedy?
I mean, I think you can't be what you can't see is a phrase that gets used a lot in terms of conversations around diversity. And I think that you do need somebody just to kind of open the doors for you. And, I think someone like Moeen Ali is a great example of a cricketer who I think will open more people's minds up to the possibility that this is something that's available to them. I think that people like him are the really important figures going forward, because ultimately, as England cricket fans, you want the best players available, so you want to be drawing from the widest pool possible. Absolutely. You don't want sections of society feeling like the team is shut off to them. And I really think that someone like Moeen Ali is a really important figure in that sort of in that fight.
Was it a hard start for you? I mean, when you think of stand-up comedy and the way when people beginning, you think inevitably sort of northern clubs, smoke-filled rooms. You've got 10 seconds to make us laugh, or 2 minutes to make us laugh, or you're out. I mean, was it like that for you? I mean,
I only started stand-up after the smoking ban came into effect, which I think was a mixed blessing, because on the one hand, the rooms were not filled with smoke, but on the other hand, you could smell what was in the room. But yeah, it's a tricky few years when you're trying to figure it out. And I started doing stand-up when I was about 20 years old, 21 years old.
Right.
And so it's definitely a baptism of fire, but the system works the way that you work it. So you spend years on the open mic circuit doing gigs for no money to people who a lot of the time don't even know they were going to see comedy. They thought they were just out for an evening just having a quiet drink in a pub, and suddenly a stand-up gig has broken out around them, and very often they are not happy about it.
Really?
And it's like, it's the perfect training ground. So now if you go and do a gig in a comedy club or a theatre with people who not only want to see comedy but may on occasion specifically want to see you, you're like, this is easy.
Yeah.
I've performed to people who absolutely despised me and I've come through. You know, the system absolutely works. Like everything that happens to me now, 10, 12 years into my career in comedy, I've been prepared for by years of shouting at strangers in rooms above pubs.
Extraordinary. Do you include, what don't you include in your stand-up? I mean, are there areas where you don't go? But I know you do take the mick out of race, don't you? In your,
I don't think there's an area that I would rule out going into, and certainly in terms of going and watching comedy shows down the years, I've seen people cover a variety of different subjects, and some of them, you know, really kind of not the traditional comedy subjects. I mean, it's really inspiring to watch a comedian like, say, for example, Hannah Gadsby or Bridget Christie go into some potentially uncomfortable and tricky areas and somehow navigate that in a way that makes the audience laugh, even as they might be feeling uncomfortable as the comedian starts to talk about a particular subject.
I wonder if people feel a little more awkward laughing at that sort of thing now than they did maybe 20 years ago.
I don't know, it's tricky, isn't it? Because there is this kind of prevailing wisdom that somehow people are more easily offended than they've ever been.
Yes.
But I mean, that's certainly not something that's reflected in the comedy that I'm seeing. Like coming straight from Edinburgh and seeing, in a month where I've really seen lots of female comedians tackle the kind of Me Too issues and the issues surrounding that particular subject in a really frank and funny way. It doesn't feel like people were offended by it. I watched a lot of really brilliant shows by comedians like Lazy Susan and Rose Matafeo really tackle a lot of these contentious subjects head on. I think maybe what people are not up for anymore, but I think this has been true since the early 80s. What people don't necessarily want to hear is comedy that comes from a perspective of, prejudice or, the kind of comedy that, as much as comedy integrated my family, there was a lot of comedy in the early 70s on television that was specifically designed to alienate us, and comedy that targeted us and, made us feel uncomfortable. That, I think, comedy audiences have grown out of that now.
Sort of 8.5 Hot Mum.
Exactly. I think there's not really the same space for that. And it's not that, that kind of stuff is banned or frowned upon. It's just people don't think it's funny anymore.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people talk about the idea that there's a particularly kind of censorious atmosphere in comedy clubs. And there's no censorship. You can get up and say whatever you want, but it's true democracy. If the audience don't laugh, it's not funny. That's the reality of it.
What happens if they don't laugh? I mean, I'm sure they laugh at you all the time, Nish, but there must have been occasions when they haven't.
Oh, when they don't.
What do you do?
It's absolutely excruciating. I have had, some incredibly awkward evenings. You feel really bad because you can see the whites of their eyes and you can see into someone's face as you think, I've really spoiled your night out. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no other job that you do where you could look into someone's face and go, I've ruined your day. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have that kind of, you don't have that same level of,
But it'd be the same joke that you cracked the night before.
Can sometimes just not work.
No, isn't that odd?
It's absolutely fascinating. It just means that it's never boring. I don't see this job, and I see people who've been doing it 25, 30, 40 years, and they are still scratching their heads over why something that worked yesterday didn't work tonight. And that's the kind of exciting challenge of it.
Is it sometimes because you just haven't delivered it very well?
Sometimes it's because you haven't delivered it well. Sometimes it's because you put a word slightly in the wrong place. It's funny how it's such a kind of fine-tuned machine sometimes. If you drop a word in the wrong place, or if you kind of were too loud in one bit and then not loud enough in another bit, there's such sort of minor dynamics going on that change the entire thing. And sometimes it's just because they were weird. And that almost is the most difficult thing, where you go, I did that exactly right.
Yes.
And the audience still didn't go for it, and then you just have to go, well, fair enough.
I've stood up at dinner sometimes knowing it's going to be a tough one. There's something about a feel for a place, isn't there? You can when you walk on, you just somehow know.
Well, you've done it. You've done plenty of live performance yourself.
Yes.
You know what happens when you just walk in and you just go, oof.
Yeah, and it's the first failed joke, and that just confirms it, and that's a horrible feeling. You've got 45 minutes, or is still to go.
There must be times where you because I've certainly experienced this, but there must be times on stage where you're 5 minutes into something that's supposed to last a couple of hours, just thinking, what if I just say to them, listen, shall we just pack up and go home? Shall we just, is there some way that we can just cancel
Well, it's like doing this
whole
interview.
thing?
So here's my clock.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll get a little secret. In that my interviews on here, as I've touched the alarm on there now, my interviews start at 1:05, okay? And they finish at around about 20 to 2.
Right, okay.
I don't look at that clock until I think it's 25 past. Because then I know I'm okay. All right? I just looked at it and look at that. It's 13:40.
It's 22.
You've been Nish Kumah, it's been lovely to have had you here.
It was an absolute
Thank you so
honour.
much.